Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us on the third day of the Saudi Lifestyle Week. Thank you for being so interactive with us for the past 2 days. And unfortunately, we are on our last day today, but we're also very excited. We're celebrating the success of the fashion industry in Saudi, and we're celebrating the collaboration between local efforts and international efforts. And the presence of such wonderful international brands and international entities like Payal herself. And on this very stage for the last 2 days, we've been having some very inspiring talks. And we would like to end it with the best, so that's why we have Payal with us today. Today's talk, honestly, I think is very relevant, not only to all the exhibitors here today, but also to what's happening in the calendar in the Saudi scene. We have the Riyadh Fashion Week coming very, very soon. And today's topic is about international fashion shows and the relation between that and production cycles and manufacturing cycles. We're going to talk with Payal, who is an expert in this, and she has a very rich background in dealing with brands, runways, fashion shows, and how that affects trends. But not only trends, how that affects customer demand and the manufacturing cycle that takes place in the middle of the process. Before we start with our questions, I would love for Payal to introduce herself and give us a brief introduction to her very rich experience.
Thank you, Shahrazad. Thank you so much.
Don't be humble. Say it all.
Hi, thank you all for attending. So my name is Payal Kshatriya Cerri, and I have been working in the fashion industry for all my life. That's all I know how to do. And so I've worked in India for about 7 years before doing an MBA in luxury brand management at the ASEC Business School in Paris. From there on, I worked interning for Jean-Paul Gaultier. Then I interned for the Valentino, Maison Valentino in Paris. And then I moved on when my big, let's say, thing came in 2005. I was onboarded at Givenchy to work with Riccardo Tisci for the revival of the Givenchy brand. And those were 5 very rich years where, there was a brand that was just beautiful and then not known whatsoever for years, and then just perfumes and bags, and then we came back with a bang. And those were very enriching years for me, managing the women's wear right from sketch all the way to market. Then I went to work for a children's wear brand called Bonpoint, which is the Hermès for kids wear, where I headed product, again, upstream and downstream. And then I moved on to Chanel, where I was heading the wovens division. Mr. Lagerfeld was still alive and with the house. So I had the privilege to be at Chanel, managing a very important part of the business. And in 2020, I started my own consulting on an expatriation in Dubai for a couple of years, my husband. And I started Sarayu Consulting for the simple reason that I think I had a bit of, working for others. I was done with that. And I thought it was time to kind of put myself out on my own. And in Dubai, I think the market was ripe and needed because there was a lot of PR, there was a lot of marketing, there was a lot of other kind of talent, right? And talent in terms of what does it mean to build a brand? What does it mean to run a brand? It's not exactly what you see on social media. And what goes behind a brand, and these were the assets that I brought along with me. And yeah, so since then I've been doing some work in jewelry, fashion, and yeah, that's where I am.
It's very exciting, very inspiring. But before we get into the nitty-gritty details of international fashion shows and runways, do give us a quick, brief idea on what are the main goals of a fashion show or a runway show? And when does a brand decide that it's time now to participate in a fashion show or launch their own?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. So if you're an established brand, obviously, it's just the cycle. It's just how the cycles go. But I think the relevance to what your question is, what does a fashion show bring on board, right? So fashion show, it's all that happens before as well, which is building that collection. So you have 2 options as a designer, as a brand. You can showcase a collection privately, or you can do a fashion show. So in the initial stages of the brand, normally for most emerging brands, of course, for a number of reasons, you're still too, let's say, too raw, and you need to build, the expertise and the competencies and the teams, and you showcase your collection to individual, to kind of individuals, and in a more private setting, an intimate setting. And then when you come to a stage where you're ready to do a fashion show all out, because there's one thing that I have always believed in, and I still believe in, is if you're not PR ready, do not go out there. And it's very important, because I've seen brands that fall flat on their face when they're not PR ready and they expect miracles out of their PR company. Sorry, you can't, you have to be very ready to go out there, because your brand may receive a lot of success or not, but hopefully if your brand does meet with a lot of success, you're not ready to face what's coming, and if you don't fulfill your clients' needs, you're just out of the market sooner than you got in.
And what goals do usually fashion shows or runway shows achieve? I mean, is it just exposure? Because I know sometimes it's more about prestige, and it's not just about reaching the consumers or exposing the brand to the consumers, but it's a more strategic kind of goal. So what goals do you think a particular fashion show should hit, other than just exposing a particular line?
Right. I mean, it's actually an interesting question to somebody who's been a veteran here. So if you look at the industry 20 years ago when there was no Instagram, right? So all the hard work that you did, everything that you did, I mean, nobody had an iPhone basically 25 years ago, right? So what you did, you saw it in a Vogue, right? Or you saw it on TV, on fashion TV back in the day, right? So everybody was glued to a fashion TV. That's where you saw things. And the teams, basically, so if you take the big brands, because those were the fashion shows back in the day, and today almost everybody in some which way does fashion shows, right? It was exciting. I mean, it's the whole team. It's the energy of putting that show across. It's putting those shows on a person, on a human being, the clothes that walk. And, fashion makes us dream, right? Fashion makes us all dream. We get up in the morning, we get dressed, we all feel good about ourselves, right? So I think that projection, the empowerment that, and with clothes, I think the industry seems outwardly like a very, I'm forgetting the word now, but a very, not important industry, right? Fashion. Yeah. They say, you work in fashion, right? Nothing serious. But there's so much. All of us get dressed, don't we? All of us want to aspire to look good, don't we? So it drives so much more than we can imagine below the surface. It drives employment over the world. And I think the teams that work on it, whether you're looking, the designers are the most visible part, right? Then the ateliers nowadays, since the Instagram age, that have started coming out and taking a bow. But then behind that, there's just so many other people, right? For them, it becomes a reality. Like for me, I remember when the music starts, there's a sense of palpitation there. Yeah. And when the show gets over, you're like, oh my God.
That was amazing.
That was amazing, and now starts the hard work. Because now you're going to market.
What's the hard work? What's the hard work? Now, catering to the demand or following up with the PR press, what is the hard work that comes after a fashion show?
So usually what happens after a fashion show for any brand on any calendar is that you have buyers. So you have 10 days, so whether you're participating, let's say if you have your own showroom, I mean the big brands have their own, obviously, it's their own showrooms, their own clientele. The smaller brands, of course, it's a different pathway, right? So you have about 10 days of buying. All of these buyers coming from different parts of the world, they're running from one fashion week to another, which is, as we all know, it starts with New York, moves to London, Milan, Paris, the big four. We have Riyadh now.
Yes, we do.
And in that period, all of these buyers are looking at everything. They have a certain, what we call an open to buy. They say, okay, I'm buying this. It's the big brands, yes, I think they more or less know their budgets remain more or less the same. They go back home, especially for the emerging section, and they decide, can I afford to put this brand there? How much space? And there's a lot of math that goes around, right? They place their orders, and once they place their orders, once the orders are confirmed, you place your orders to your suppliers. Okay. And a supplier, for example, in a luxury house, you can have about 200, 300 suppliers per collection.
Wow. Okay.
So I'm talking about everything from buttons to yarns to threads to zips, all the way to manufacturing. only the garments. I'm not even talking about supply of packaging or anything yet, right? So it's a massive ecosystem that we are talking about here. It's job opportunities. So it's not that frivolous a system as it looks like from the outside, and it's a very intense system. So, I've been in the trade for 30 years now, and there is never a dull moment. There is nothing like August, yes, because, I am been living in Paris for 25 years and now in Milan, so yes, August is sacred because you want to go get some sun, but besides that, you're just working all year. I mean, it's just a non-stop between shows and product development and collections and putting out there to the market and, the clientele. And I think today's clientele has become very intelligent.
Yes.
Thanks to social media, which is a bane and a boon, but brands are accountable. We speak a lot about transparency. We speak a lot about traceability. So there's a lot of things
that awareness is out there.
That awareness is out there, and brands want to know a lot of things that were confidential information in the past. So I think the industry has made a very big shift, but the houses have not yet. It's like asking your 100-year-old grandmother to make a change, right? So if you look at the big houses that are 100...
It's a practice that's been taking place for years.
Exactly.
And just innovating it is not as easy.
Yes. Some of my teams in the past I was probably the youngest. There were people at retirement age. I mean, they entered at 25 and they left at retirement. So there's a lot of respect that I have for these people, because it's an ecosystem where people, you have to be very passionate or not do it. There's no half baking there to do.
You have such a strong experience in dealing with fashion shows and runways, and you've done it across different countries. And I'm sure there are times where they're super successful, and I'm sure there are times where you saw some failures or mishaps. What would you say some are the top suggestions that you would give for the success of a fashion show? And I think you can also say what are the top mistakes that you would advise your brands to stay away from?
Well, I really don't know how to answer that one.
Because I have seen times where maybe brands try to be cultural, they try to be sensitive, sometimes they try to target different body types. Sometimes it went really, really successful, but sometimes it just had a lashback.
Well, I think, honestly, it's your brand DNA. And you just have to follow that. You don't need to emulate anyone. For example, if you want to embrace all body types, it's your call. If you want to embrace the perfect size 36, it's your call again. I don't see that personally as an issue. I think embracing all body types is great. I also know that the complication in getting, because all brands have one single collection, there's no time to go around making 2 collections. The complications to make different sizes. So there is a lot of nuts and bolts into making a collection. Now, I think in terms of, at the end of the day, what you're looking for when you make a fashion show, and that's coming back to your initial question, right? Commercial success, right? I mean, that's what, unless you have too much money to throw around, you're looking at commercial success.
And how is that success measured? Is it by numbers of publications, numbers of buyers who came and attended? How do you measure that success?
At the end of the day, you will measure it when the orders come in. It's as simple as that, right? Because yes, there is the metrics. Those metrics are very important. The metrics will tell you who attended, right? Who were the top, for example, influencers or the media or buyers, which is
how much noise it created.
How much noise it created, who was eager to attend your show. And I think that is, in the first place, a commercial success of the brand from a larger perspective itself, which means that there is a massive interest in what you're doing, for whatever reason that might be, right? It could be you're catering to something niche. It could be you're catering to a certain sensibility. It could be, it could be just whatever you believe in. And I think the important thing that I personally believe in also with what I do is that unless, or maybe at my age, I only want to do what I believe in and people I believe in working with, right? And you want to be fine and comfortable with what you do. And I think the younger generation probably has that much more than we do. Because like if I look at Paris and all of my colleagues and everyone, there's a massive burnout as well. But the people who stay in the industry, we worked. There was no Saturday, there was no Sunday, there was no midnight, there was no 8 a.m. We just worked. And when I look at the younger generation, with all due respect, is like, oh, you know what, I need to be, I don't know, jogging. And I respect that, and I still respect that, and I think it's a great shift from my generation, which probably were the last to actually, not look at hours. But again, you need to put that effort in, is what I'm saying, and you need to be passionate. Yes, you can take your breaks. Yes, you can because I think it's all important, and I actually most welcome, maybe at my age, probably I still welcome this generational shift, which has allowed all of us to kind of, enjoy that balance. But I think the most important thing, whether you're a designer or a founder, creating a brand, because there's multiple cases as well, right? There's people who are interested in the business but don't have the design talent. There's someone who has the design talent but doesn't have the business talent. So there's all kinds of cases. I think and the network, there was somebody who, in fact, I quoted it to a dear friend who's sitting in the first row. A gentleman who retired recently, and he told me one thing which really stuck with me. He said, Payal, remember that in this trade, your network is your net worth.
That's true. And I think that's in every industry.
Every industry, right? And the people you know, and in the fashion industry in particular, because it tends to be an industry that tends to be kind of quite closed.
And I think it's one of the goals in fashion shows and runways as well, to have those connections, to build those connections through the shows, through the invitations, to expose the new lines.
Absolutely.
And so on and so forth. That takes us to our next question. I mean, creating fashion shows, especially for the upper scale brands and the high-end brands, it's not just about creativity and launching a line, but there's so much of logistical planning that takes place in that process, because you are setting a trend, and then that has a lot to do with manufacturing and the supply chain and how to get these pieces into the stores. And I remember just a while ago, I saw a video where a consultant was saying one of the mistakes a particular brand did is that they launched their new line on a runway, but then there was so much time between exposing that line and then getting those products into stores in different parts of the world. And because there was that gap, once it was launched in the stores, people felt that the product was repetitive and the sales didn't hit the target that they wanted. So take us through that process, because for us, we just feel like, a fashion show is about coming up with the show, but there's so much more that, you forecast, and that you're setting a trend, and that has a lot to do with the production and KPIs in terms of sales and so on and so forth.
Absolutely. It's like a show is just, it's just the tip of the iceberg, right?
Exterior of it all.
Yeah, it's just the tip of the iceberg. It's what you show. It's what people see, right? It's so typically, the example that you gave is unfortunately very common.
Okay.
It's unfortunately very common because when you launch something, then there's no stop to it, especially in today's world. You could afford to, 15 or 20 years ago, take it a little easier.
The pace allowed us to
If you were an emerging brand, you could afford to do it differently. Let's say the flip side today of social media is that you're under the spotlight, you're in the public eye, and so once you've launched something, there is no stop, there is no pause, right? Then again, it could mean, I don't know, they decide I'm doing one collection a year, and that's fair enough. They decide I'm doing 2 small collections a year, fine. I'm doing a capsule. Whatever your strategy is, stick to your strategy, because your clients are expecting that. They're expecting what you've been communicating, right? In terms of the cycle, so depending on how big your scale is, it can go from 3 to 6 months, right? Depending on how big the collection is, because you have the first stage, which is the order for your fabrics, your yarns, and then again, there's different segments, right? So if you're doing, you have your wovens, you have your jersey, you have your knitwear, you have your leather. So there's different, all of that, and there's the ordering of the trims, what we call trims, which is your buttons, your zips, your what have you. And all of that, all the way to stitching garments and getting them to your warehouse could be a 3 to 6 month process. Fabrics alone take 3 months. It depends. Again, it's all your scale, it's all where your sourcing is, and sourcing is global. So it really depends on the segment of market that you're catering to. So there is, just multiple options globally where you can source. But that is, it's very important in terms of knowing what your sourcing is so that you are prepared. But it takes time for a new brand to even arrive at that stage where they know where they're heading and they are assured, because it takes time. It takes time to find the right people who do who are capable of doing what you want them to do. So, yeah.
Payal, just before coming on stage, I had a conversation with you, and you spoke about the different brands that you worked with, and just before opening your consultancy, you worked with Chanel. But while you were talking to me about this experience of yours, you said this very, very interesting statement, and I wanted to not ask you too much about it. I wanted to elaborate more about it on stage. You were talking about the different sectors of fashion in different countries. Some of them are commercial, some of them are just about retail, about selling the product, and then some of them have the full ecosystem, which is the understanding of the brand and understanding of the high-end brand fashion environment. Not only the society, but the whole process of launching these brands and, introducing the fashion sector on that level. Can you explain those differences? And from your knowledge, where do you see Saudi standing today?
Right, yes. So yes, I think it's all about an ecosystem, right? I mean, if you compare, for example, a country like Italy, which still has the ecosystem end to end. Okay, so retail, I'm taking that as a given in every part of the world. An ecosystem means having everything you need in-house, right? You can your procurement that happens, the supply that happens. You can buy your buttons, your threads, your manufacturing, your fabrics, your yarns, whatever you need to make that collection, right? Obviously talent. Well-trained people that understand how to do things correctly, that understand the importance of respecting deadlines, because even though we are not surgeons, respecting deadlines.
Still economic driver that we have to respect.
Absolutely. And dealing with manufacturers is a very tough one there. So countries that have ecosystems, so Italy is a classic example that has retained in terms of heritage, in terms of tradition, the textiles. India is a very important country from that perspective, because India end to end has that also with their own internal designers as well, in homegrown designers, and the whole manufacturing. An Indian designer doesn't necessarily need to look outside. Then there are countries which are really on the manufacturing spectrum, like you said, countries like Egypt, Morocco, Tunisia, there's Madagascar, Romania, Hungary, name it. I mean, there's so many countries where there is so much of
they focus
talent.
On manufacturing and
yes,
the back end.
Dyeing units. You're looking at, it's the global manufacturing map is very wide. People say, oh, okay, the Indians will say all the inspiration, everything is in India. Sorry, it's not, because there is talent everywhere. There's arts and crafts everywhere in the world. And interestingly, so when, the time I lived in Dubai, obviously that's when I got to know a lot of Saudi people, and then, there is the Fashion Commission, the Saudi 100 Project. What I really appreciate about the culture and the tradition is that you guys have it all, in the sense that it's there. It's not, there's a lot of room to expand it, but it's all there. There is the love of, I think, every Saudi designer or buyer I've met, for example, at Premiere Vision, which is the most important fair to go to for sourcing, luxury sourcing, they had a sensibility. I could compare it to a Japanese client that understands, you guys appreciate, right? So, and appreciating it, if you look at also, the stand where that's the example I also gave you, right? Of sourcing vintage, and reviving those. And there is the artisanal side of it that is still alive. And I think it needs to be nurtured. And I think compared to, maybe other countries within the region,
So it's
that
not just the business of fashion, but
Right.
it's the
There
artistry and the understanding of what fashion is.
it's very important because your designers, your designers, and everybody who works in the trade, right? For them, it's very important. Also, it's like a big family. Then, if you're just selling like certain countries, very commercial, also in the region or anywhere in the world, do not focus on that. And I think that the Saudi 2030 vision is very geared for that. And of course, the Fashion Commission, the Saudi 100 program, like I was telling you, I mean, when you look at some of those brands and you're like, did this come out of those brands are international?
Because the role of these entities, I think, is not only to empower the Saudi brands, because yes, they have been doing that. We'll take a few seconds. I'm sorry we cut you in half. Do you want to continue from where you stopped? So we were talking about the ecosystem that is available in some countries, and some countries are more focused on manufacturing, some of them are more retail, but what makes industry in a fashion industry in a particular country so well-rounded is when they have that ecosystem. You explained the
Right.
difference between them, and then we were talking about Saudi Arabia as an example.
Yeah, I mean, it's you tradition and crafts, I'm not so sure if you can acquire them. It takes generations. And, it exists here, right? In so many different areas related to textiles, related to craftsmanship. So when a country has that, I think it's a very natural evolution to want to build that. Some countries are successful while some countries aren't. Sometimes it takes luxury brands to come in and, kind of empower that. Because I've played that role firsthand in my own country. manufacturing, where the level of manufacturing was quite questionable back in the day in India, and then you need to really work with your manufacturers, set the tone, and it takes a few years sometimes. I won't name my former employer, but a certain jacket, which I guess you can understand who that could be. People who made the patterns for those jackets would have to be trained for 5 years.
Wow.
Minimum of 5 years before they can actually touch a real pattern and make that pattern, which would go out. So there is a lot of, which again, I think there's the craftsmanship, right? Because then you're talking about people who are really craftsmen in villages. How do you acquire that, right? In the sense, it's in your DNA, in your blood, or it's not there. And
it's a generational process to establish.
Exactly, right? And there are countries which had embroideries, like France, for example, back in the day, Louis XIV, they had a flourishing industry, and then it fizzled out over the years. They're now trying to revive it, especially, with one of my previous employers that, invests a lot. So the luxury brands invest a lot. I mean, if you look at, Hermes invests a lot in so many countries across the world as well. There was, the recent, many other examples where, there's what they call cultural appropriation, but at the end of the day, what is cultural appropriation, in the sense you're actually helping craftsmen get jobs in those countries.
True.
So I don't think it's something to be criticized. I think
and
it's something to be
that you
rejoiced.
have to maintain with the age of fast fashion, where I think the appreciation for these time-consuming handcrafts, handmade craftsmanship, is not appreciated as much, but brands that are, I think, noble and high-end are still insisting on preserving that area from the fashion manufacturing side.
Yes, and for all the flake that these houses get, I guess because I've been there, I defend it. I defend it full-heartedly, because had it not been for these brands, I do not know where my own country would be in preserving our own heritage.
There's a lot of pressure that comes from fast fashion. It's pressure on the kind of material, it's pressure also on the price. And how do you think high-end brands today are dealing with that pressure? I'm sure in some areas they need to adapt, and in some areas they're still holding on to what they believe is right. You mentioned an example of a jacket that people who work on it have to be trained for 5 years, but I think that's why also these pieces last for years, and not only last for years quality-wise, the trend lasts for years. A particular LV bag stays in fashion for many years. A particular Chanel bag stays in. I know people who wear their grandmother's Chanel bag, and it still looks like, it's still trending. So how would you say these brands deal with the pressure of fast-end fashion?
Well, I think, there's room for everyone. In the sense, your wardrobe, my wardrobe, we'd have everything from a Zara to a Chanel, right? So, and I think people who can afford it do that mix of a wardrobe. So brands are not so concerned, the bigger brands. I think the concern would then be if you're in that same playing field. You're not really concerned about, market share.
Okay.
What you are concerned about is being copied. So back in the day, and I can talk about it because it's been really long, when I worked at Givenchy, we would bring a collection out. I remember my boss always said this thing to me, Payal, get it out there before Topshop does. Okay, and I'm quoting, unquoting, because it's in weeks. Today, it's even lesser, because, there's a lot of trend forecasting that happens. There's, a lot of fabrics that because they're doing mass scale, right? So they're able to churn out collections, albeit obviously it looks somewhat like that, but it's not exactly like that. It's not the same quality, but there are stripes, so you put stripes on the jacket, or there's an animal print, and it goes very fast. I think it's just flattering for a brand, and of course there's a lot of counterfeit cases that I've dealt with in my career, but at the end of the day, unless that counterfeit is eating a share of your market, I don't think it's, it's not a great, I'm by far not promoting any of that. Again, one is speaking about counterfeit, one is speaking about fast fashion, and I think fast fashion copies a lot, obviously.
True.
because they don't have the design teams for that. You know, they are just churning
They're
out.
fast. They need to,
That's what they need to do. They have some of their designers, but then a large part of it is not design the way I know it to be, which is sitting across the design studio having an inspiration. Oh my God, I saw that feather in Peru. Can you get it for me?
Yes.
You know, and how do I get it now?
The artistic process takes so much more time, where the fast fashion doesn't have time for that.
Exactly, and I think the whole social media game now, fortunately or unfortunately rather, has put a lot of pressure on the houses, because we don't have the time anymore, the luxury anymore, for designers to do what they want to do. Right? Because earlier the designers drove the market, and I'm reading a lot of conversations on social media now. And why did the houses come to that is because, you know, there was so much pressure, and the musical chairs. I mean, you can speak about a number of things. They existed 30 years ago. There's nothing new about it. It's just that, you know, nobody knew about it. You know, designers, people like myself, you know, a director moved from one house to another, a buyer moved from one house to another, a designer moved from one house to another. There's only so much of a talent pool, right? So I think that, you know, fast fashion, I think what it does do is trickles it down. And the trickling down effect is, I think, great, because not everyone can afford that, you know, I mean, half of us on this planet can't even afford to be clothed decently.
That's one of the advantages, yeah.
Right, so I think it's, but again, fast fashion for those who can. I mean, I am all for beautiful fabrics, beautiful makes, and like I was telling you, a garment, for me, a garment that lasts, is as well made inside as outside. And it has to be passed down generations. And this is my personal philosophy. Then, of course, all of us end up buying that piece, you know, which costs 20 euros. And but you would want to invest in something that lasts long.
True.
And yes, there's a lot of pressure because, you know, volumes have gone up a lot for luxury brands in the last 5 or 6 years. How do you double, triple that manufacturing capacity? You know, all of a sudden, there's strategies, obviously, but it's not that easy to maintain the quality. Wages have gone up in the world post-COVID tremendously. So I see a lot of, you know, journalists, people speaking about, and I am like, how much do you understand the back end of this? You know, how much do you understand how expensive it is to make a garment today, a well-made garment?
And a few years ago, there was one high-end brand who tried, I think, reaching that production level, but then there were defects. There were a lot of defects in the quality of their production and their products. None of the brands that you just mentioned, but one of a brand that's on that same level. And I think that is where they either strike the balance or they have to, you know, struggle with the pressure.
True, and it's the easiest way to lose a customer. It's
And
the
the
easiest way, because, you know, you look at something on Instagram, you'll buy it, but how does it live in your wardrobe? How does it wash? How does it dry clean? How does it wear? And that's when you'll have a repeat customer. That's when you will recommend it to your friend, right? You'll say, oh yeah, I bought this. It's probably an unknown brand, sustainable or not, or whatever. You would recommend it only if you really like the product.
Yeah. That's such a beautiful understanding on the difference between brands when it comes to high-end and then it becomes fast fashion in the production process. The past few days we've been talking about it from different areas, but talking about it from this perspective is just so new and so different. And if you would allow me, I'd like to go back to the runway scene and the fashion show scene. One of the benefits or the opportunities that fashion shows hold is the space for collaboration between that brand that is being displayed and international brand, or collaborating between local artisans and international standards. And I also know you've been exposed to the Saudi market a lot lately. How do you think the upcoming Riyadh Fashion Week or the past Riyadh Fashion Weeks in the past 2-3 years have brought that collaboration into action, where we're taking the Saudi fashion scene and linking that to international standards or collaboration with international names?
I think, you know, the most important and one of the biggest distinctions that I find about Saudi is that these are initiatives that are consciously led, right? Like the Vision 2030, which means people are invited to participate in a collective. So the buzz that's there, and of course it takes it takes time, you know, it takes time to build anything that's worth building. So when the Riyadh Fashion Week started, probably 2 or 3 years ago, right? It was just initially just homegrown brands. And then there were invited designers. And there is, the idea of wanting to develop your homegrown talent is a must. And then the idea of being open to, what the world has to offer, you guys are embracing both of them. And I think it's very important for a fashion week to embrace both, because that's where you have the international traction. And I think that, like I said, it takes a long, it's all trial and error in this business. Everything is trial and error, unfortunately. Is you try, it works, it doesn't work, you take a step back, you switch your cursor. But the important thing is, okay, what are the designers that you want to showcase? And in fact, you mentioned something to me which I didn't know at all, is of course I knew that the Saudi 100 program is very strict about the entry, as well as the Riyadh Fashion Week, because you want to maintain that level.
Keeping the standards very high.
Right, you want to maintain that level, the standards. And whether it's what people see on Instagram is one thing, but what is the commerce aspect behind all of that? And I think that, the programs that are being run currently in the state are just very important, because there is, accompanying these designers, accompanying the mentors, because it's one thing wanting to do something, and it's another thing getting on your way to become experts in that field. Right? And that comes with time. It comes with patience. It comes with humility. It comes with repeating the same thing again and again. It comes with consistency. I think consistency and perseverance are my two biggest words, and you just need to. So I think, you guys are really doing a fab job, and I think, it's going to not be a very long time before we can see that up there, along with, with the big names in fashion weeks.
Your knowledge about different fashion weeks and different fashion shows around the world, in Europe, in Asia, is so high, because you've been exposed to a lot of that and you're updated with all of that. What do you think today Riyadh Fashion Week stands, particularly that it was introduced, but also before that, Vision 2030 put such a high goal. We are on the track. We're not off track at all. We're very much there. But at the same time, that put us as a Saudi industry in a position where we want to compete with international names. We want to compete with Milan Fashion Week. We want to compete with Paris Fashion Week. Maybe it's ambitious to compete with those names since we're in the beginning of our journey, but I think we've already and we've placed them as our competitors, and we want to reach those international standards. Where do you think Riyadh Fashion Week, the different fashion shows that take place in Saudi, will reach in the next 2-3 years, taking into consideration the achievements that the scene has been achieving in the past 3 years, say?
To be honest, it's a long path. It's a long path, because you're also competing equally with the Sydney Fashion Week. There's so many fashion weeks today, right? And so many of them are valid, have their own strategy, but I think in the region, right, there is a spot to be taken.
Yeah.
There's a very important spot to be taken in the GCC, in the MENA region. And I think you guys are very well placed to take it, because it requires dedication, hard work, consistency, and a collective effort as a family. And I think you have all the ingredients to make that recipe a success.
It's nice. I know I'm very Saudi proud about the fashion scene, but I also think this topic is very relevant, because we're on the verge now of starting Riyadh Fashion Week, which is a big event on the Saudi calendar. And last year's achievements also put us on the international map. One of the topics that we've been talking about in the past 2 days is sustainability and sustainable fashion. And since fashion shows and runways have this very strong role in setting trends, how do you think today the different brands, when it comes to fashion shows and runways, are adopting sustainable fashion and the different elements of sustainability?
Sustainability, I think, has become the most misused word of the last decade.
Please tell us why.
No, we're not going there. That's another one, and I don't think
Let's be diplomatic.
I don't think anyone's sitting here.
I would love to know your perspective.
Well, I think that people spoke about greenwashing a few years ago. People spoke about a lot of things, but the hard reality is, I don't know what I can compare it to, but the hard reality is that when you have an ecosystem of even 20 suppliers, or forget the 300 suppliers that luxury brands that I have worked at every show, how do you control all of that? Right? You don't have people flying around. You have to trust. You have to trust your manufacturers. You have to trust that there are labels, there is certifications and what have you. And yes, they can be trusted as much as I question. I'm from the trade, so I do question certifications as well. Of course, that's the only, let's say, gold standard that you have. And I think that's a very important step in terms of certifications. But how do you measure sustainability? And I think this is a question that keeps coming back again and again and again.
It's a very broad area. People say sometimes it's about consumption, the way you consume your clothes. If they're more durable, then yes, it means that it's going to last for longer years, so it's less consumption of different purchases. And some say, no, it's in the production of the fabric itself and the garment itself. It's a very broad area.
It's upstream and downstream. And when I say upstream, it's in all of your manufacturing, in the content, let's simply put, of the clothes, right? The packaging, everything, right? And then there is the whole downstream, which is your retail end as well. Even that is sustainable or not. It's not just the clothes. I think the most important thing is banning polyester, right? I mean, that is one of the worst things to this planet. And I think the number one thing that a brand needs to do, let's say if you want to claim to be a sustainable brand, and today, I mean, I really advise, young designers to be very careful in doing this, because people call you out. People call you out unless you have, and it's extremely difficult, even for the big groups, to actually put that in numbers, right? So it's a very complex, it's a complex thing, but at the end of the day, what I say is and the way I work with my clients is, so pick your battle. What is your battle, right? What is your battle? Is your battle banning plastic? Simple. Keep it simple. Keep it an achievable goal. This year I ban plastic. Next year I ban, mixed fabrics, or I have used polyester and I ban polyester. Go small. Go small and be consistent in your efforts. No matter what, be consistent in your efforts and go towards that. Don't, if you're a new brand and you want to do everything at once, so no, it doesn't work. It doesn't work, because you'll realize that there's so many roadblocks that you'll meet, and you'll say, oh my God, I want to do this, but I can't do it because my supplier uses this, right? So there are dyes. Nobody speaks about dyes, dyes and dyeing, like fabric dyes, right? Color dyes. Let's not even speak about the impact.
Everything else, but in the end of the day, there is a particular level of chemicals in the fabric.
Yeah, I've been to many dyeing units, and I can tell you after 10 minutes you can't breathe.
Wow.
In spite of all the aeration, in spite of everything, and I have some of the best ones in the world, which exist in Italy, in Portugal, and Spain, and I can tell you that you're coughing by the time you get out of there. So yeah, there's just it's a vast subject.
Payal, you've worked with so many different brands. You have also worked with so many runways and fashion shows, and now you're a consultant. So from Payal's point of view, or from Payal's perspective, when you look at a particular brand, for you, what defines a brand being successful or hitting the target? What does Payal want to see in a brand to be satisfied in? I know you've developed a few brands, and a few of them are here in the exhibition today.
Yes, and I invite you to please visit. What's the stand number? 4125? Yes, please visit stand 4125. We've got some absolutely spectacular clothes for girls from 3 to 12.
And it was a coincidence that I was talking to her today, and I said, there's this brand that has perfect finishing. And she said, yeah, she's one of my clients. We developed it together. And it shows.
Thank you. For me, again, like I said, trends come and go. I guess because I'm of that generation. Trends come and go, but I think all of us somehow are like that, right? We would follow a trend, but what is even, we can speak about trend forecasting, that's a whole nother topic, right? We were speaking about it earlier. What is your personal style? And I think all of us have a personal style, right? You can follow a trend or not, but all of us have our personal style. The trend becomes accessible when it's accessible in the market. Me, I'm not one who follows trends. I'm actually against the tide, always
You're more
been.
classical?
Sorry?
You're more
No, I'm just, I wore oversized clothes when they were not a thing. I'm still like, I'm size 30, this is size 44. So I'm just somebody, I've been always against I just dress how I want to dress.
Authenticity of choosing your own style.
Yeah, I just think that there is no judgment for anyone to be had. You don't need to follow a trend. And then again, there is trends that kind of make you inspire you, make you dream. And of course, I go for that dress because, okay, this is cool right now. But, tomorrow, am I going to keep it in my wardrobe? So my purchase, I guess, again, it comes with time, is my purchases with time, especially today, is will this piece last me? I think it's my primary focus is, will this last me? Of course, can I afford it? But will it last me? And how, is it something that I can pass down to the next generation? Not always, but, honestly, so this is, 10 years old at least, the shirt. It's a Chanel, it's 10 years old, and washed and worn God knows how many times. This is, everything that I'm wearing here. The amount of pieces that I have, and today the pieces unfortunately don't last that long. The amount of pieces that I have knitwear, particularly knitwear, which you get those little balls that come out, right? Knitwear, the knitwear industry has obviously, changed a lot in the last years, and I'm very particular about the knitwear that I buy. And I don't know, I just think it's important for me that I love it. I can make crazy purchases as well, but yeah, I think it's very important. The inside of the garment is very important to me.
So what if I come to you, I'm a designer, I have my established brand, but I wanna take part in one of the fashion weeks, and I come to you and I say, Payal, I want you to be my consultant and I want you to get me there. What would be the first few steps that you would tell me to do?
Well, I think I would first analyze where you were, right? What stage of the brand that you're in, how ready you are to even do a fashion show, because that's a big step to go to. What your numbers are, how long you've been selling, how long you've been in the market, who your clients are, where your clients are, what sensibility, what market does your product cater to, in culturally speaking as well. And then, of course, advise you when and how to enter a certain market or participate in a certain show. But I think, again, you should not be in a hurry. Should not be in a hurry, because going there and not being ready for it is in my opinion, I have
damage done to your brand.
Yeah, and there's no looking back from that. There is no looking back from that, because especially today, because it's all on record, and you could just be lucky and get orders, and you could, you said it yourself earlier, the example that you gave, that a brand got orders and they couldn't fulfill them. And will somebody online place an order while being in a car or in a metro or whatever, place an order again of that same brand because they didn't get delivered? They wouldn't, right?
Yeah.
Or they got delivered something which was defective or didn't match up to the quality. So, you walk your talk. Is you say, I'm selling this, and you sell this. And you have to be prepared, again, is really my mantra. If you're not PR ready, don't go out there.
What does that mean, you're not PR ready?
Is that if your brand doesn't have a certain foundation right, your PR agency will not be able to do miracles for you. And when I say foundations, I'm talking about the business foundations of the brand. Obviously, I take for granted that you have the design foundation ready, that you have the whole ecosystem, because a country has its ecosystem, like we mentioned. Right, and as a brand, you have your own ecosystem, which is a trusted ecosystem where you know that season after season, this is because it takes a long time to train people to get something right. And that's what's not PR ready, is going completely out into the market. You don't have a stock, for example, and people don't really understand. Clients don't.
Your supply chain is not ready to.
Your supply chain's not ready. you're just in some way not ready to be exposed out there because you will not be able to fulfill certain requirements, or that you're partially ready and you have everything ready, and when that big thing happens for you, that you've got it all in place.
I think that's something very important, because one of the misconceptions a lot of the brands have today is that as soon as we do launch or we do establish the brand, the first thing we do is let's go all out marketing, thinking that this is what's going to lead to the success of the brand. And you explained that so well, where you have to have the readiness to be exposed and the consequences of being exposed before you plan to be exposed and get so eager to be out there. I want to ask you my last question before we start with Q&A. We did talk about sustainability, and you have been exposed to a lot of high-end brands. Today there's a trend of pre-loved and pre-owned items. On one hand, it does serve the sustainability angle, but from another hand, a lot of high-end brands feel like this is somehow affecting their value or the value of their brand. What is your perspective on this?
I have personally been selling and buying on Vestiaire Collective, for example, which was a big thing in France. I think it was 2012 or 2011, and I was right there. I had a lot to sell as well, I have to be honest. So for years I was selling things that I told myself, maybe, you know what, I bought this and that, and I'm not going to wear it. What I love about these platforms, to be honest, is especially Vestiaire, and then there's Real in the States. There's a few platforms, right? There's Luxury Closet, which is based in Dubai. Is that I believe that there's still a taboo for clothing here, obviously, as in my home country, India.
I feel like there's still a hesitation towards buying something that was
previously worn.
Previously worn. That's why they added the label pre-loved.
Yeah. And a pre-loved bag is one thing from pre-loved top, shirt, right? Because it's been worn by somebody. And I think that is gradually changing. So I personally, I think the issues there are then more logistical, and then relate, your carbon footprint, etc., etc. Those are there's a whole set of different issues that are coming up for these particular companies. But overall, I personally, I think it's a great thing. I think buying pre-loved, some brands. So if you look at the coats, right, Vestiaire Collective. So certain bags. I mean, if that you can look at, that some of the classics, right, which you bought at about 4,000, 5,000 euros retail, let's say 6, 7, 8, 10 years ago, and now those same bags are costing you 10 to 12,000, and on a platform, on a pre-loved platform. I think the pre-loved platform, when you look at the prices, I'm very interested in this topic, so when you look at the prices, you understand the worth of a brand. When a brand is quoted, everyone wants to snap it up, right? And then the ones that really last, like an Hermes or a Chanel, the timeless stuff, there's just so much demand for it, even on the pre-loved platforms. And then there are the more trendy, then you have your off-whites, your whatever things that come and go and that are seasonal or that, that are designer-based. So you get a good feel on these platforms as to who's trending and who isn't. And then the ones that are always there, the best-in-class ones. The houses, I believe they're actually starting their own initiatives.
That would be nice.
Right? So, for example, I have a 21-month son, and Jacadi, for example, in Paris has a program where even if, you can buy a jean, but it has to be in perfect condition with a lot of, a huge checklist. Cannot have a single stain. Yes, my boys.
I didn't know that brands had that initiative. I thought
they
do.
Were completely against so I'll get back 5 euros, for example. I just gave some stuff back in Paris before coming. 5 euros if it's in perfect condition, and then they refused 10 other items because they found a stain which I didn't see. Perfect pieces. You'll get 5 euros for something that you paid 80 euros for. And then they resell it on their own.
It's more about having these pieces used again than what is the return in cash.
Correct. And then there's upscaling that happens as well. And then there is, of course, archives is another story, but there's a lot of upscaling that happens. I think a lot of young designers worldwide, they work on that. So you buy pieces. There's a lot of initiatives as well on this front, where you buy pieces, you upscale them. They could be Gautier or Vivienne Westwood era, time pieces. So yeah, I think it's, you know, there's room for everyone in the market, and why not?
That's so informative. Payal, honestly, if you leave it to me, I would ask you questions all day. But unfortunately, we're tied to some deadlines and time limits. So I think right now I'm going to give everybody a chance to ask you a question.
Hello. Can you hear me? Okay. So I had a question of what would you, as someone who had, so much experience, have advice for someone who's just an intern or someone who is just now getting into the industry, someone maybe who's a startup business, someone who's just now entering the field that you are in? What is some advice that you would give them?
I think it's pretty simple. Just be humble, persevere, and don't give up. Learn from people, and just keep at it. You know, if it's a passion, you will get there. You will get there if it's your passion, if you're interested in what you're doing, and if you love what you're doing, observe. Um, be interested in every part of the trade, whether it's design or whether it's a craftsman or whether it's understanding how something is woven. Try to visit, from factories to labs to whatever you can. Be interested, take short courses, meet people, talk to people, because I think a lot of interesting things come out of conversations from people who've been in the industry. And just never give up.
Definitely. And I also had another question. If you hadn't, if did you ever decide to or think of giving up on fashion and doing something else?
Oh, a million times.
So how did you get back on track?
It's an exasperating industry. Because it's
I
what
know
I
you
love.
said you have to be passionate about it.
Oh no, there are days,
know?
I think after every fashion show I wanted to give up. But then you keep coming back because it's a drive, because what you're doing, no matter how frivolous it feels, it impacts a lot of people over the planet. And I'm not saying it's a humanitarian job there, but it's an industry that makes you feel good and look good, and you're part of something big. You're not. It's not as frivolous as it looks from the outside. So no matter what your role is in the fashion industry, whether you're working with a house, whether you're wanting to intern or start your own brand or be in PR, it's that whole ecosystem, media. I mean, there's just so many aspects to the industry, that people that are within and people that are supporting the industry. So yeah,
We all watch Devil Wears Prada. I mean, how accurate is that?
Yes, one of my favorite movies, actually.
very.
Now they're coming out with a second. Yeah, they have a second one coming out now, so.
We'll go back and ask her how
Yes.
accurate that is as well.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Hello.
Hi there.
My question for you is, how different has your style changed over the years, and if you think age restricts certain styles?
I think my style is still a lot influenced by my Givenchy days, because those were the years when I was new in the industry, and what we were doing back then was we used to call it street couture, and Ricardo called it Ricardo Tisci, who was the head designer back in the day, who brought the brand to the success that it was. There is obviously a lot of Givenchy in my DNA, a lot of Chanel as well, but I like to evolve, and I think it's important to wear pieces that you feel comfortable in. That's it. And I think that's literally it. It's you have to feel comfortable in what you're wearing. You can be a certain size or not. You want to feel comfortable in what you're wearing. And of course, you wear something to project a certain image, right? Consciously, unconsciously. And if you're comfortable with it, I don't think that you should not look outside. Simple.
Thank you.
Speaking about the global fashion trends, what's your most and least favorite fashion trend?
In terms of personally, I don't follow fashion trends and for my personal style. I think for businesses, right? The trends are the ones that also drive a lot of the manufacturing. And I think that these trends, there are lots of trend forecasting agencies, And I think with AI today, that has multiplied a lot, but then there's the accuracy of certain agencies and not. There's Piclair, there's another French agency called Heritech, there's a lot of agencies. So they can forecast different trends, funnily, right? For 2026, you read X, they're saying ballerina pink, but this one is saying leopard print. Okay, where do I go, right? They can all cohabit. And I think all trends in a certain way are valid. Like, I remember last year before that, they kept saying capris were back.
Yes,
I never saw anyone wearing them, sorry.
In TikTok, I see.
I don't know who said that, but
They
I
tried.
personally never really saw anyone wearing them. So, and then of course, trends drive manufacturing, which is true. Trends drive the Zaras. Trend will drive the H&Ms and the Zaras. And trends will drive what you see on the streets to a certain extent, because that's what people have access to, right? So if there is, I don't know, a asymmetry, which is, the buzzword also of this season, asymmetrical pieces, or there's a lot of yellow that I saw in all different shades, or, these nice pinks, a lot of volumes. So from one season to another, trends can vary. And I think that it really depends. So I don't know if you're coming from the designer perspective or a brand founder or a student I don't really know what perspective you want me to answer on. If I can be more accurate then. You're looking at it from a brand perspective?
Yeah, from the brand.
Right. So if you're in that segment where you know that your clientele is driven by trends, then you might want to pick up 2 or 3 of the going trends to kind of, give them your touch of it, right, with a little twist. And this is what you have, and this is what you are representing, with a little touch of that trend. But you don't need to go all out. I think that clients are looking for something fresh and not
Something special, unique.
unique, exactly. And I think as long as you're able to balance that between following a trend and providing something unique as a brand, blended with that trend, I think it's a great balance.
I think you said something key here, that fashion shows for high-end brands, they set the trends for fast fashion brands. And that's how the effect of high-end brands trickle down to the manufacturing process of the easy, fast fashion. And that goes back to the whole topic of today's panel. Do we have any more questions?
Hi. Actually, thank you so much for the information I've received. Do you think that I believe on sustainability, and I'd like to make it in my brand 100% sustainable. But do you believe that it's possible? Because nowadays it's so hard to have the good high-end quality and sustainable and at the same time. Sometimes I feel that it's impossible, but I'm encouraging myself to believe that there is a solution for that. Usually the sustainable materials are so expensive in the market, and the audience, they don't recognize the value and the cost of these materials. So if the brand wants to consider sustainability 100%, is it possible, and how they can apply it in their vision?
There's nothing called 100% sustainability.
Why not?
It doesn't exist. It
And
doesn't
why not?
exist. No, it just doesn't, because like I said, it's a very big ecosystem. There's nothing like 100% sustainable. You pick your battle and you go with it. So you say, okay, my goal is by 2026. Like I mentioned earlier, I want to ban polyester in my clothes. Then I want to ban use of plastic. Then I want to ban use of certain, suppliers that use certain chemicals. Then again, it depends a lot on the laws of the country, because in the EU, the regulations are very strict with regards to certain chemicals. So if you're importing into the EU, you cannot have anything with those, and these were set, 20 years ago. So it's the ecosystem again. So there's nothing called 100% sustainability. It's just how sustainable you can get. And sustainability for me is not just about clothes.
Even relation, I
it's
believe.
about the people.
Even in relation with the client.
It's a lot about the people that work with you, that across the board, whether it's freelancers, in-house, external. So I think you pick your battle and you walk the talk. So even if that means that, and how do you measure? I don't know how to measure sustainability. It's a very misused word. How do you quantify it? If you take the, I don't know, 50 elements in a garment, it's not simple. So I think one has to be very careful before putting forth that claim, and put forth the claim that you can back up. And be honest and open about it. Because like you said, it's very expensive.
Yeah.
It's very expensive to be sustainable. It's not cheap.
Yes.
So we can aim towards sustainability, but I think 100% sustainable is something that is yet hard to attain.
Yeah, I think it's an industry change that will happen for sure. Whether it's a decade or two, I don't know.
And when can I consider my brand as a sustainable brand? Is it by measuring, or I don't know? How can I?
It's
do
by
it?
measuring certain aspects of the entire supply chain, the upstream and the downstream. What is it that you can measure, and what is it that you can't measure? And the things that are measurable, I mean, you can have some ideas. I mean, if you can Google, you'll know what is measurable and not measurable, and see what you can measure, what you can't, and then you kind of claim how sustainable you are. There could be certifications. There's a lot of other elements that come along with it. The certifications that your supplier provides, lab tests. There's just so many things that you can do. Again, does your ecosystem support you in doing that?
Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Any other questions? I have a question. What's the difference between a fashionista and a fashion person?
Come again?
What's the difference between a fashionista and a fashion person?
You tell me.
Thank you so much.
But I think
Thank
that's
you
a
so
really
much.
important question.
Is it? No, you really put me in a spot there, Abdullah.
You see, the word fashionista, for me, I feel like it's misused, especially when it comes to people who are just entering the fashion industry on social media, for example, or they want to market themselves as such. So they don't know which spectrum they are at, they don't know which category they belong to, so they just slap that title on themselves. And they call themselves fashionista. But there's a stylist, and a stylist has to follow particular achievements to become a stylist.
Right.
An art director in fashion also has to have particular achievements. There are requirements for that. So somebody who doesn't know where they are, they just say, we're fashionistas or fashion enthusiasts.
Yeah, I guess you've got your answer here, so thank you.
I'd like to thank the team for asking Payal to be here, because you're the best fit for today's topic. I don't think there would be anybody else who would have so much knowledge. And each answer of yours was so enriching that I didn't zone out for a single second. Neither did I go back to my questions, because each of your answers just gave me more curiosity to ask you more. And I truly think they left the best for the last.
Thank you so much. Thank you so very much. Thanks for attending, and thank you so very much for being a lovely, lovely host.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was our last panel, unfortunately, for the Saudi Lifestyle Week. See you next year, and thank you all for being a part of this. The AC today is different. I know, I have to wear my